Welcome, friends, to an extra spooky episode of the GM Journey. And I'm your host, The Messenger. The track that we're playing in today's show is Intro from the game Devilish, and that was composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto. I normally don't follow a theme for these kind of shows, but I'm going to change it up a little bit and only play spooky stuff or music from games that have spooky elements in it. So nothing straight up horror except for this next track that I'm going to play. I think you guys will get the gist as we go on with the show. And the next track that I'm going to play is Kerosene from the game Clock Tower, and it was composed by Kōji Niikura. That scary sounding track that you just heard, that was Kerosene from the game Clock Tower, and it was composed by Kōji Niikura. I've never played this game, especially with the fact that it only came out in Japan, and it was for the Super Famicom. But I have watched some gameplay for it, and I have to say, it is pretty interesting that it goes for a point-and-click kind of style. Except it's a horror game and you have to make decisions on the fly because you're trying to avoid this creepy little man with, I would say, gardening shears or giant scissors as he's chasing you through this house. I know that it eventually got a game on the original PlayStation. I'm not sure if it's a remake or a sequel. I want to say it's a sequel, but this Super Famicom original, I think it's got a pretty interesting soundtrack. It's not a very big soundtrack. There's not a whole lot of music in it, but the stuff that is on there, it's pretty good. I definitely check that out. This next track, it's going to be a total tone shift, and we're going to go from a straight up horror game to a, I would say, adventure style game. Not really. I don't even know how I would describe Luigi's Mansion, but this track is coming from Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This is Library Piano, and it was composed by Chad York, Darren Radtke, and Mike Peacock. That track that you just heard, that was Library Piano from the game Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, and it was composed by Chad York, Darren Radtke, and Mike Peacock. This was such a fun track, and this game is pretty good. Even though it's my least favorite Luigi's Mansion game, Dark Moon is a really well made game. And the fact that it was on the 3DS, I thought that was super cool. I think the one problem that I had with the game was that it was split up into different levels. So every time you would complete an objective, you would have to go back to Professor Egad's lab. And I thought that kind of broke up the flow of the game if you wanted to just play through it. But it was meant for a handheld system, and it was meant to be played in parts. So it was definitely perfect for that. But that play style was not really my preferred way of playing. I would have preferred to just play through everything if I could. And this soundtrack, I thought it was surprisingly good. Not that I was expecting it to be bad, because it was the composers from Next Level Games, but it's really tough to have to do the music for a sequel to a game where the soundtrack was composed by one of the usual Nintendo composers, which in this case, on the original Luigi's Mansion, that was Kazumi Totaka. But I thought Chad York, Darren Radtke, and Mike Peacock did a great job on the soundtrack. This next track is from a very classic game, a super classic game. It is Forest of Monsters from the game Super Castlevania 4, and it was composed by Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo. That track that you just heard, that was Forest of Monsters from the game Super Castlevania 4. It was composed by Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo. Super Castlevania 4 is such a great game, and the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic as well. There was absolutely no way that I was going to do a Halloween episode and not have anything from Super Castlevania 4. I don't have too much experience with the Castlevania games. I mean, I've only played a handful of the classic Castlevania games, but Super Castlevania 4 is definitely one of my favorites in that series, at least for the ones that I've played. And I think it's a really good starting point if you want to get into the Castlevania games, because the story for Super Castlevania 4, it's a retelling of the first Castlevania, where you play as Simon Belmont and you have to kill Dracula. I mean, that's really just the big point of the game. It's fun. I think the controls on Super Castlevania 4, I think it's a lot better than the original Castlevania games. I know it's not really much of a hot take, but I mean, it's definitely not a hot take at all, but it's something that I've noticed, and it's something that I could totally get behind. And this soundtrack is absolutely perfect. It's got catchy melodies, but it's also very atmospheric at the same time. It really gets you into that spooky vibe. This next track, I think, is pretty special. It is from the Splatterhouse reboot? I would say it's a reboot. The one from 2010. This is Reflections of Blood, and it was composed by Howard Drossion. That track that you just heard, that was Reflections of Blood from the game Splatterhouse, and it was composed by Howard Drossion. That's going to just about do it for the show this week. If you like what you've been listening to, have your friends check out the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever podcatching service that you could think of. I'm more than likely going to be on there. You can email the show at vgmjourney@yahoo.com. And also check us out on Twitter at VGMJourney. I'm going to play out with one more track, and it's not necessarily spooky, and the game that it's from is not very spooky either, but you do get some vibes, and this track is absolutely amazing. This is The Poet and the Muse from the game Alan Wake, and it was performed by Old Gods of Asgard. And have a good week, everyone.
There's an altar wrought with mystery of Tom the poet and his muse, and a magic lake which gave a light to the words the poet used. Now the muse, she was his happiness, and he rhymed about her grace, and told the stories of treasures deep beneath the blackened waves. Stillness of wonder, and still in its misty crown, the muse, she went down to the lake, and in the waves she drowned. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. That's how you reshape destiny. Down to the lake to call out to his dear. When there was no answer, he was overcome with fear. treasure lost, and too soon the night would fall, and only his own echo would wail back as his call. And when he swore to bring back his love by stories he'd create, nightmares shifted in their sleep in the darkness of the lake. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light still raving in the night. That's how you reshape destiny. In the dead of night she came to him with darkness in her eyes. We're in a morning gown, sweet words as her disguise. He took her in without a word, for he saw his grave mistake, and vowed them both to silence deep beneath the lake. Now if it's real or just a dream, one mystery remains, for it is said on moonless nights they may still haunt this place. Shape